Welcome to the ACT podcast. I'm Lizzie Harewood, as usual, and we're here today to talk about a sensitive and at times quite controversial topic, but one that schools are expected to address, and that is the topic of abortion. And for Christian teachers, this can raise important questions about how to teach about the choices around pregnancy while remaining faithful to biblical convictions around sanctity of life and the intrinsic worth of every unborn child. And to help us think about this topic, we're joined by Catherine and Carolyn from the Centre for Bioethical Reform, or CBR, to explore how we can talk about this with wisdom, confidence, and compassion. So, Catherine and Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us on the ACT podcast. Could you begin by telling us a little bit about CBR and the work you do generally?
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for this opportunity. We really appreciate it. And to be honest, this is combining my two jobs because I've been a primary school teacher for nearly 30 years, covering primary, middle school and SEN schools. For the last 12 years, I've been a supply teacher in mainstream primary schools with mainly long-term contracts. And this can range from small schools with just 2 classes to larger city schools. So I've got quite a lot of experience of different types of primary schools. And also just this year in February, I reduced my teaching down to 2 days a week, and I'm now working for CBR UK 3 days a week. So this podcast is a combination of both of my jobs. So that will be
excellent. So your dual skill sets.
Yeah.
So what does CBR do then, Catherine? Can you tell us a little bit more about its mission, its vision?
The CBR UK seek to educate the public primarily about the true nature of the unborn and what abortion does to the unborn babies. We do that through our teams across the UK and a fresh one in Jersey, in the Channel Islands, who go out on the street once a month usually with images of those 2 stages of life, that life in the womb and then the picture of the baby after abortion, and engage using our apologetic skills and conversational skills with the public to get them thinking about what they truly believe about abortion and challenge those preconceived ideas about it. We also have an organisation or a project within our organisation called RSHE, which is church-facing. It helps engage leaders and give them resources to speak about this subject with compassion, with clarity within their churches. And also, at the moment, it's developing within RSHE a project called Hope that helps churches engage with those who are in unexpected pregnancies and how the church can be the church and actively support those women who are in difficult circumstances.
So why do you think this is an important issue that as Christians in general, but as Christian teachers, we need to be grappling with and understanding at this particular moment in time? What is the lay of the land? Can you tell us some information about abortion?
Yeah, so recently this year, our government have made it criminalised for a woman to abort her baby at any stage of pregnancy for any reason and by any method, so long as she does it by her own hands. So that was a recent development brought in near the end of last year, and then in 2026, decriminalisation was passed through the House of Lords and then the House of Commons. So at the moment, we have the most liberal or lax or lack of abortion law in the whole of Europe. And this is leading to higher and higher abortion rates. Our most recent statistics, because our government is still trying to catch up with the huge amount of abortions that they have to process, we're dealing with 2023 stats that were around 300,000 abortions. And a lot of those are happening at home with pills by post, which was a temporary measure brought in, or supposedly temporary measure brought in during COVID, but has been now permanently made law that a woman can use abortion pills in her home to abort her own baby in her toilet up until 10 weeks, but obviously without medical examination or checks in advance of this abortion procedure, it's possible for her to abort a baby at any stage of pregnancy using these pills at home, and that does sadly happen. And then within the sort of teaching aspect of it, children from a young age, but mostly between that 15 to kind of 18 bracket, they account for a lot of abortions in this nation, although the older age bracket is creeping up as well. 30 pluses, 15-year-olds to 18-year-olds account for a lot of that 300,000 abortions that Carolyn obviously has a perspective of in the classroom.
Sure. So just before we get into in the classroom, I think it is worth us just pausing on that number, on those statistics that really are shocking. And in fact, I remember having a couple of conversations with a few different folks and saying that now around 1 in 3 pregnancies ends in abortion. And the people that I spoke to said that isn't true, that can't be true. 1 in 3. And when you look at how many babies are born live and then how many pregnancies end in abortion, it really is 1 in 3, isn't it? Am I being correct there?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. Of the babies conceived, we lose some to miscarriage, some are born alive, but 1 in 3 babies will be aborted in England and Wales. Shockingly high.
And why, again, sorry, we will get on to thinking about in school, but why is this a problem that Christians should be taking seriously?
So if we believe what Scripture says, that every human is made in the image of God and is a precious gift from God, then every human life is worthy of protection. And only God can discern when life begins and ends, not us. And if we know what abortion does, which is taking the innocent life of a human being, we know that every abortion is taking a life that is not ours to take. And not only that, it also creates a massive separation in the hearts of women towards God. Often it can take years and years to overcome the grief and sorrow that kind of get in the way of their relationship with the Lord. It's a deep pain, and we see it within our churches, we see it outside of our churches. It's gripped our nation for sure. When you see the reaction that most women have to abortion, it leads to all sorts of complications, including things like alcohol abuse, drug abuse, eating disorders, depression. Yeah, the state of our nation, I think, is contributed to largely by how many abortions we see take place.
Yeah, no, I think that's very insightful. So abortion is one of those things that does need to be covered in curriculum, particularly in relationships and sex education. And so CBR do have a wing that is focused on schools and education. And could you tell us a little bit more about what CBR do in schools?
It's something that we want to work on. So that's why we're grateful for this podcast, really, to publicise what we have got. And we've got material, 3 lessons and a PowerPoint that can go into a secondary school, which talks about pro-life issues. And then we've also got the primary schools, PowerPoint and 4 lessons, which talk about the value of life. It links with the curriculum, which in year 5, it's really clear that you can talk about when life begins and what a baby is in the womb and how we then grow into a toddler, a child, an adult. And so it's really easy to get in about how life does begin in the womb. So while primary curriculum obviously doesn't go into abortion, but it does go into looking at how we're wonderfully made and how we're not just a clump of cells. And also about how even at 22 days that a baby has a heartbeat, that how a baby is formed at 4 weeks, arms and legs start to form, at 8 weeks every organ is present, and at 10 weeks the 90% of the body parts are formed. So I think even at that level we can get across that it's not just a clump of cells where unfortunately young girls and women are told that abortion's okay because it is just a few cells and it doesn't matter. So the primary curriculum is obviously a lot more careful about what's being discussed, but it can still be there and getting a Christian message across as well about how they're beautifully made.
Absolutely. So I think that's brilliant. You focus on the reality of prenatal development, about the humanity of the unborn child. Would you frame this in biblical language, or is this something that is perhaps a little bit more pragmatically presented? Not that you don't have to be pragmatic and present it in a secular sense, but yeah, how is it presented in your resource?
In the primary one, it doesn't particularly mention any Bible verses, but obviously you can do. But I think you can just present the scientific facts. And that's at CBR, we do just present the facts, and the facts speak for themselves, don't they? That when you show how a baby is made, then it's really clear. And there's so many videos now of babies in the womb that you can show that to a class and it just speaks for itself. And I found that even doing supply teaching, I've been given a couple of lessons this year where I've had to cover year 5, and it's really easy to just show a video of a baby in the womb. Obviously in secondary, it is a requirement to teach abortion. We have got material which just shows the pro-life side of things, really, and it just shows the other side, and about just the opened up that debate, which I think is what we're going to go on to talk about more.
Absolutely. So it'd be great to understand then, perhaps, and I know this is certainly something that I hear from ACT members and other teachers, that particularly at secondary, at that age, you know, messages that young people are receiving about abortion from social media, from their friends, from popular culture, seem to be pointed in one particular way. And then that seems to be confirmed by the sort of tone and the nuance of the curriculum. So what kind of messages do you think they are hearing, even in schools?
I know from a social media perspective, abortion has been largely trivialized. It's made to be, on one hand, almost no big deal. Celebrities have them. Lots of women go through an abortion. They're fine. It's a positive female experience. And equally, the abortion providers, their social media thrust is that it's healthcare. It's essential for us to have access to it. We need it. Let's normalize it. So really just becomes part of the furniture, that abortion just exists in our culture and it's not really a big deal. But sorry, what was the second half of your question? In the classroom, how is it?
Yeah.
So from experience of just speaking with secondary teachers who are having to cover this subject, they're struggling where the issue is supposed to be presented in a balanced way. But I think it's almost impossible, if we're intellectually honest, to present abortion in a balanced manner, because as soon as the facts about abortion start to be presented, it intuitively becomes a negative subject. Because we can't talk about the reality of what abortion does without it appearing as it is, the death of an innocent unborn baby. And when we're hearing that contrasted with it's normal, it's healthcare, it's a woman's right, it's a normal female experience, and when we look at the truth about it, suddenly the balance isn't there anymore. It's fallen one way or the other. It is a very polarizing issue. And I think teachers who have contacted us about this have really struggled to strike that balance when they're confronted with what the students are already exposed to and then what resources they've got to work with, which is it's one of 3 options. There's adoption, there's keeping the baby, and there's abortion. They're all just equal. They're all the same kind of moral weight to them, that there's no difference between them.
And I think that I certainly know of teachers who have felt that even though the statutory guidance says that it should be balanced and students should be able to make informed judgments, often there is maybe the sort of hidden curriculum, there's a push towards saying that abortion is a moral good in and of itself because it is something that is liberating, particularly for women and for girls. And perhaps the language surrounding it is much more positive. I'm not trying to say that they always present keeping the baby as negative, but there does seem to be that sort of that posture of positivity and actually perhaps glossing over some of the information that might make for more balanced discussion around the realities of the physical impact, the emotional impact that you already spoke about. How can we as Christian teachers perhaps bring more of that legitimate balance without getting into trouble? Because there's a part of me that would love to go and say, this is an inherent evil. The idea that you can sacrifice an unborn child, that, you know, someone that is completely unique, that is made in the image of God, that has dignity, that they can be sacrificed for whatever reason, even if those circumstances of conception were really traumatic. I feel that I wouldn't be able to do that particularly well, but there surely must be areas that we can legitimately pursue with regards to factual information, presenting something in more of that sort of objective manner. As you say, it's hard to actually be objective when we look at the moral realities. But yeah, how can we, what's the kind of the open door?
I think it is to have that discussion, isn't it? To allow pupils to have that discussion in the classroom. So to show those different points of view. Unfortunately, on social media, they're showing it as just such a routine clinical thing which can just happen and you forget about it. But I think we need to get the point across that it can have so many side effects and negative effects afterwards. But also, obviously, to show we do have a video which children or teenagers, it's up to them if they do watch it or not, to show what the impact of an abortion is, what actually happens, and then to allow that discussion. Unfortunately, in society, that's something we're not where we have that open discussion and respect other views. But I think we need to encourage that in the classroom. We need to encourage teenagers to respect other people's views. In that class, there will be teenagers that have either unfortunately already had an abortion or are sexually active, but there'll also be some who are horrified by it. And I think we need to be open to respecting their views as well. Nowadays, unfortunately, that's often pushed aside, isn't it? So
yeah. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the resources. Can you give us any details of what they cover, what sort of themes and topics are included within them?
Yeah, I could walk you through the secondary school content, which I'm most familiar with. I've had the most opportunity to present that to secondary classes. But we cover some of the bigger questions that get asked of us a lot in that age bracket, like what is a person? To start with, that's the whole first section of the presentation, is talking about what makes us people, and it is our shared humanity. So it looks at different variations in humanity, how some of us may be familiar with Nick Vujicic, who was born without arms and legs. So the things that we would describe as a human, someone who looks like a human, as is often the case with an abortion argument, that it doesn't look human yet, or it doesn't present as a baby, it doesn't look like a baby, it looks like a tadpole or whatever. Does that mean that we're any less human? Nick Vujicic doesn't look like every other human that you might meet on the street. Is he still human? And it constantly reaches out to the students to get them to think and reflect back to us what they're thinking about it. What about the ability to feel pain? A baby in the womb can't feel pain, often a justification for abortion, but there's plenty of opportunity for us to share about people who are born without the ability to feel pain. Would we say they were less human or less part of the species because of their lack of that ability? And passing it back to them, what do you think about that? And they often will conclude, rightfully, that even though we have lots of variations to humanity, all of us have shared humanity, which gives us that value and that personhood. So that's the first section. And within that, we look at a resource that is available, even if nobody wants to use our content. ERF.science, Education Resource Fund, has amazing quality footage and imagery of babies in the womb. So they use a technology called embryoscopy, which uses a camera in the womb. So that produces amazing footage from very early pregnancy all the way through to birth. And equally, they've used that footage to use a form that's called mosaicing, where they patch together intricate sections of each video to form the most detailed pictures of a baby in the womb you've ever seen. They are stunning and beautiful. We use those on our street displays. We use them in our schools content. We use them on our website because they're the most beautiful and detailed pictures. And I think I was talking to Carolyn about one of our team leaders. He's a secondary school teacher. And he said that the resources he was given to cover a lesson about fetal development were disappointing. It was a grainy black and white photograph, an illustration that had been photocopied of a cross-section of the uterus with a baby just drawn inside it. He says, I know we can do so much better because we have these amazing photographs. So I would encourage any teacher who even isn't interested in touching the abortion issue, if you're going to talk about fetal development, get onto ERF.science and have a look at their free imagery because it's just stunning. And we also then go on to what society says about abortion and what do the abortion providers say about abortion? What do they say about their own product that they're trying to peddle? And just get them to continually assess themselves. We want the teenage brain to kick in and figure it out for themselves. And lastly, talk about abortion. Very briefly, just the statistics, the most boring bit for any student to look at the numbers on the screen. And then we give them the opportunity to look at what abortion does. Obviously, with plenty of warning, we allow people to look away. Obviously, we're giving them all the preparation that they need in order to just watch a 1-minute video with no sound to it. So if they choose to look away, they don't hear anything they don't want to hear. They won't hear a description or any music. And then we notify them when the video's finished playing. It goes through abortion procedures from 10 weeks through to 22 weeks. And let them know we're working on a new format that will also include filled by post-abortions. 1-minute videos finished, we then say, it's time for us to discuss this. What do you think about it? What are your thoughts? And there are no silly questions. There are no long questions. It's really important that we give half the time at least that we're with them, to debating it and discussing it and hearing their thoughts. Some of them obviously touched by the issue already personally through family or themselves, and others are just academically considering the subject with no emotional attachment. And it's usually the most fruitful time. They've already been presented with the facts. We can refer back to it throughout the discussion. What did you think about that picture? If they say it's not alive, okay, at which stage in that video that you saw did it become alive? It gives us all the tools we need to have a really fruitful discussion and a debate about the abortion issue and the value of human life.
So I find that fascinating because I can imagine that grounding your discussion in, first of all, I suppose, the reality of prenatal development and the clear humanity of a developing fetus, a baby, and then the reality of abortion and its results. That must be really helpful. I suppose if I'm playing devil's advocate, I hate that phrase. So a teacher might say, we might talk about a procedure, say a bowel resection after cancer, but we wouldn't necessarily have to show the images to explain the benefits of that. Why is that different in abortion?
I would say there are obviously restrictions in some school settings, and that actually doesn't stop the power of being able to verbally describe these procedures. And I think it's important that we do. If we're learning about abortion, instead of just saying it's a procedure that removes a baby, or even the phrase we're going to hear is terminates a pregnancy, isn't it? Yeah. In reality, that's what we'll hear. To describe the three formats in which that happens with real, honest language can be just as powerful. So to explain how an abortion pill works, that the first one will starve the baby of nutrients and oxygen for it to die, and the second will induce labor so that the woman has to deliver the baby into the toilet. None of that sounds like a nice, healthy, well-rounded female choice. It sounds horrific because it is horrific. But even if we're restricted in the use of imagery, we can verbally describe it. I haven't emphasized anything. I haven't made it sound more gory than it is. It's just the facts. Equally, there's another video that I would recommend again. It's from Live Action, and it films Dr. Anthony Levantino, who is an ex-abortionist, describing abortion procedures like I have just, using language and medical terminology, but also an illustration in the background of how those procedures are performed. So it's more cartoon, less film footage. But again, it's an honest explanation of abortion procedures. It doesn't involve looking at the victims of abortion like our video does. But in our presentation content in the pack, we say in our letter, teachers, use what you want to from this. It's all good content. It's all helpful. If a teacher is in a position where they're unable to use that video, describe it. If you're able to use the Dr. Anthony Levantino video, use that instead. Use whatever resource you feel is possible to portray the truth in the most accurate way. It's really what the presentation is based on. It's facts, it's science. It's not our personal slant. It's the truth about it.
Sure. Also, I think that having another type of operation, whether it's a bowel or hysterectomy, all those other things, that is to help the woman's life, isn't it? It's to improve that woman's life. She's in pain or there's a problem. Whereas with an abortion, it's not. It's being sold as more as a contraceptive and it's not going to improve that woman's life. She is going to live with that. And it's a serious thing to take on, really. So I think you need to try and separate what many women will go through lots of operations, that's to help improve them, isn't it?
Even just drip feeding people can find content, or it's just even just stating there is footage available on the internet of what abortion really does. Our kids are living in a really visual culture. I was shocked when I came into church after Charlie Kirk's assassination. I personally had not seen the footage. All of the youth had. They had all had access on the internet to watch a man be assassinated. And I had no control over that. So if the child is that interested in finding out what an abortion procedure really looks like, a teacher doesn't need to really emphasize heavily that there is a possibility of finding that out for themselves. They will probably find it if they're interested enough.
Sure. So your teams, am I right in saying your teams do visit schools, or is it more that they provide resources for schools to use if they wish?
So initially, when we made the school's content, we were personally blessed with the capability of going into schools. It really does depend on the team and the head of the school as to whether they think having an external visitor is suitable for covering that subject. I think some of the teachers that I worked with were keen for someone else to take on that difficult subject, and it wasn't coming from them personally. They'd already reviewed the content. They think, okay, this is going to work for my class. And then having someone else present it, I would hand out my business card. If you have any questions, if your parents have any questions, send them to me, not your teacher. I said it. So that's always a good option. It's come from me. So you can always reach out and we can discuss it further. But now we have about 40 educators who are using our content either in youth groups or in schools or for home education. So we have our resource available online for people to download. But either way, we're pleased to either have the opportunity to present it ourselves, or if a teacher wants to take the content and use whatever part of it that they like, they can access it online for free and have the Drive document sent to them.
And Carolyn, is there anything that you found that helps schools to engage positively with your work? Because I can imagine in today's society, I can imagine it's actually quite hard to be able to gain access to schools. I think, despite the fact that myriad of other organisations have, perhaps not so much in the last couple of years, but over the past sort of 5 to 10 years have gained access to promote certain ideas about sex and relationships. Have you found anything in particular that does ameliorate your message to schools?
I think that's when we are relying on Christian teachers in schools, aren't we? And that we are called to be a witness. So even if you're having those conversations with other staff members and starting to show those other points of view, I think we've got to start to explain to even the other adults. And that's what I found doing the CBR job, is that a lot of adults in schools are very naive about what an abortion is and how many abortions there are in this country. So I think as a primary school teacher, obviously you're there to educate staff as well. And obviously, again, we need to be aware that there's going to be staff members where this is a sensitive subject, where they may be post-abortive. But again, you're there to support them, aren't you? And to show that love and compassion towards them. So I think there are those opportunities. And if we're in that school setting, we can still be used to explain it in a loving and compassionate way.
And I think and I think anyone in their right mind, any reasonable person, whether they're Christian or not, wouldn't say that it is a moral good that 1 in 3 pregnancies ends in abortion. And certainly was not the intention in the 1960s when the Abortion Act was passed. Obviously, I'm very sad that was ever passed, but that wasn't the intention, that 1 in 3 pregnancies, that we'd have 300,000 unborn children have their lives ended before they've even been born. So therefore, it is an indicator there's something quite drastically wrong. I suppose what I'm thinking is how this can be not sold, because I think that implies a level of malevolence or a level of being illegitimate. But I think, how can we persuade perhaps head teachers or our line managers that actually this is a legitimate question to have, that the information you're presenting does stay within statutory guidance, it encourages thoughtful discussion, and is a legitimate part of relationships and sex education. Have we got anything to add to our arsenal? Because I thoroughly believe that this is something that young people should be exposed to, because I can guarantee that the majority of what they receive in school will be pivoted the entirely opposite direction.
I think it is going to our line managers or senior staff, isn't it? And showing that we need to value the other point of view as well.
Yeah.
And that in society that we need to be open to the other point of view, and that often that is squashed out because it doesn't fit in with the narrative that we're all being persuaded that we're overpopulated and that we don't need as many children. And again, we know that's not true. So I think we need to be called to be wise, aren't we? And I think we need to go and try and be bold. And I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not saying, but at the moment, I think Christians are being quiet because we don't want to upset people. We don't want to cause trouble.
And I'd love to touch, you just mentioned a point about overpopulation, etc. And actually what we know generally now, it's being acknowledged that actually our nation has the opposite problem, in that our birth rate is lower than it should be, or lower than we would like it to be, in order to be able to have a sort of productive and effective state, basically, in the coming generations. If we're going to have people to, not that I think that we are just economic units, but people to work, people to care for an aging population, etc. I wonder whether, could you just speak, maybe Catherine, briefly about why this is not just a topic. As Christians, of course, we believe that ultimately this individual that is made in the image of God deserves to be protected and to have life. But this isn't just an individual problem. This is also a societal problem. And why should we be perhaps talking to young people about the big picture, as well as the kind of considering the humanity of an individual?
I can see I've got 4 children, one in secondary and then 3 in primary. One in primary recently was celebrating Earth Day. And in the assembly that he was sat in, he was basically being told that humans are just a blight on the planet because we've made it such a mess. And he stood up and left the assembly. And I asked him why. And he said, because humans are amazing. We're not a problem. And he's from a biblical perspective, but obviously his school was teaching it from completely the opposite side. And if children growing up in that space where they're being told that paper cups are very important and humans should really decrease their population in order to save the planet, as though it's an idol, they're going to grow up thinking that we're not valuable. And actually bringing more children into the world is the worst thing they could possibly do. We hear this on the streets often in our conversation. How could I knowingly bring a child into this world in the state that it's in? I'm only damaging things more. When in reality, like you say, it's important that we get the facts out there that we're creating this inverted triangle of the population with a tiny younger generation and a massive aging population, to the point where in my local area, there is now only one preschool left because everything else is a nursery. There's not enough children to fill them. Year groups are dropping in size because the birth rate is plummeting year on year. So this isn't just an issue that affects us spiritually, and it's not just an issue that affects our health. It's an issue that affects our population as a whole. And as I said earlier on about the mental health effects of abortion, you can see a very clear correlation, not necessarily that correlation is causation, from 1967 onward, where the rate of women being involved in violent crime, women being imprisoned, women becoming alcoholics or abusing drugs, or entering into multiple relationships and having multiple fathers in a family home, all ties in with the moment that abortion is made legal in our nation. And we see it now. I spoke in one classroom that was considered the inclusion class in an all-girls school, and I was told by the girls within that classroom that every single one of them, all 13 of them, had experienced abortion by the age of 16. That's shocking. And then do we really have to question why they are within that inclusion class, where they're struggling to exist in a school environment, where they're struggling with themselves, with depression, with their behavior, when they're dealing with a huge amount of grief and sorrow that nobody really is making any sense of for them, because they keep telling them it was the best choice for them, that it's the right thing for them to do, but their heart's telling them something else for them. It's a huge struggle. And the more we don't address it, the more we say either it's no big deal, why are you making such a fuss? Or we say it's no big deal, but neither are true. That Jesus is big enough to deal with it, and he is more capable than anyone in humanity and beyond to give out the grace and forgiveness that's necessary for restoration after abortion. And if we don't talk about it, then they just believe that the huge amount of grief and sorrow that they're experiencing is just them. Everyone else is fine apart from me. But it's just not true about this realistically, so that they know they're not alone and there is a way forward afterwards. We can pretend like children in our schools aren't having abortions. They are. And if we don't talk about it, we're simply ignoring their pain.
So we'll think about drawing to a close in a moment, but I'm very interested in presenting this, particularly as a big emphasis in education at the moment on things like toxic masculinity and misogyny and the empowerment of young women and girls. And I do worry then that perhaps abortion gets subsumed into this idea that abortion is a very empowering and uplifting option if a girl chooses that path. But you're saying that actually the evidence isn't there that abortion would necessarily lead to more empowerment or a happier life. Can you give me any more information or data on that? Because I think that's a really important piece of information to reveal to young people who are making decisions and who need to weigh up pros and cons.
Yeah, I would highlight another organisation to any listeners who've experienced abortion or who know anybody who has. If you visit postabortsupport.org.uk, that's free Bible-based recovery for women who've experienced abortion. And I always highlight that in schools that I visit as well. Before I start any presentation, I always share this information that we're not here to judge anybody. We're here with compassion and understanding. In fact, we understand more than those who are saying it's just the right to choose, that you've lost a human baby, and that's a big deal. And there is possibility of recovery and restoration. But of those women who experience abortion, there are a lot of peer-reviewed studies, large-scale studies that are accessible online with a cursory Google. But just some of the stats. Well, physically, 1 in 17 women who use the abortion pill will need hospital treatment afterwards, complication, and 33 women become an inpatient every day in the NHS due to abortion complications. There's an 81% risk of mental health, increased risk of mental health issues following abortion. Drug use is 250% higher in women who've had an abortion. You're 190% more likely to attempt suicide after an abortion. It just goes on and on. We've created a large study for peers and MPs during the process of DIY abortion up to birth being taken through the House of Commons and House of Lords. And I probably will add it to the school pack, actually. It's very interesting reading to see these large peer-reviewed studies. But Pauline, who founded Post-Abortion Support for Everyone, PACE, she says to teenage girls on the street even, you've got this train track of your life ahead of you. You think, this is the way I'm going to go. This is the job I want to do. These are the GCSEs I'm going to take. And you get pregnant and you think, I'll just hop off those train tracks, have an abortion, jump back on and carry on down that same trajectory. But it's impossible to ever get back on the same tracks again. Life has changed forever because you're now the mother of a dead baby, and that impacts everything you're going to do for the rest of your life. If you find yourself pregnant, jump off the train tracks, have that baby. You can still jump on and do those GCSEs later. You can still jump on and achieve that role in your workplace later on, but you can never get back the child that you've aborted. It has an impact forever. And I do think, if we're going to share the facts in a school setting, we can also share the facts of post-abortion stress syndrome and PTSD that comes with abortion as well.
Need to remember as well the teenage boys as well, because they are obviously involved. And I think Catherine had the experience of a lad who his girlfriend was having an abortion that day against his wishes. And so I think we need to be aware that boys need to be educated as well, don't they? And that even now on the streets, we regularly meet men who are upset because their partners, wives, girlfriends have had abortion either in the past or without their knowledge. So I think it's a sensitive subject for those boys as well. And they need to be taught that what an abortion is as well and what that involves, don't they?
If I could just jump back into that kind of toxic masculinity and what I call faux feminism, like faux fair, that idea that abortion is empowering. I think I stand with the original feminists of the States who just said abortion is the greatest abuse of women. If we choose to celebrate femininity, we celebrate our body's capability, whether that's realized or not, to be able to produce human life. We say to women, in order to be equal to men in our society, you have to become like a man and break your fertility and destroy the parts of your body that will produce life, even if you never intend to realize that capability, because it's not a problem to stay single. I think that also needs to be highlighted in high schools. They're so preoccupied with relationships that actually singleness for the Lord is also an amazing sacred calling. It's not true that the abortion industry cares about elevating women and femininity. In fact, they're the ones who are seeking to tell women, you're not capable. You are so incapable of pursuing your career and having a baby that will kill your baby for you. You are so incapable of having more than 2 children, will kill your baby for you. You are so incapable of achieving this experience that you're hoping to have, this holiday or whatever it is that women go in to have an abortion for, that they're telling you, you're right, you're not strong enough. But the pro-life movement is completely counter to that. You are capable. You are strong enough. Women are amazing. Women are superheroes in society. We raise the next generation and we can do everything else. And we do amazingly well.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bigger issue in society, isn't it? That we need to value the role of women as being mothers and even being at home. That can be the most important job, to bring up your child in a loving and caring way. And I think part of the education is to emphasize that, which is hard because a lot of them are going to be coming from dysfunctional families, split families, all sorts. But I think that doesn't stop us trying to educate and show that it's an important job to bring up a child.
And it's just as valid an option as any other, despite what society may say, particularly to the middle-class girls from well-to-do families. Actually, it is a worthy vocation that has immense reward and that our society doesn't value enough. But that's not to say that has to be a full-time, that all women have to be full-time stay-at-home mothers at all, not at all. In fact, I think that's the point you're making, Catherine, isn't it? That women today are empowered to do many things, but yet when it seems to come to the idea of managing to have a child and also perhaps pursuing a career, you're told that you can only do one or the other, or you can only do one well and the other one badly. Whereas what you're saying is actually sometimes things may need to look different for a short amount of time. But actually, today's society should be set up to empower and enable women to have children, look after their babies, and then get back on their career train. And if that's what they want to do, and that's something we should be encouraging. And it just breaks my heart that women feel that in order to be successful, they would have to sacrifice their children. And listen, I know this is an incredibly sensitive topic, and I imagine we'll get lots of people perhaps a bit concerned that many Christians aren't gracious enough, etc. And of course, it's important that we aren't unnecessarily confrontational. But I do think it's one of those things we've got to a point as society where a third of unborn babies are killed in the womb, where actually we can't, as Christian teachers, just sit back and present all options. We need to present the reality of all options. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So that doesn't mean that you have to ignore statutory guidance at all. But I think the reality of all options needs to be presented with clarity. So if you could leave Christian teachers with one encouragement, what would it be? Anything in particular to take away? And then we'll talk about where we can find your resources.
I think it is to look back, isn't it, on history and think of those people like William Wilberforce, Thomas Clarkson. We talk about those in our training and how they stood up for the slave trade. That wasn't easy. They got a lot of whack for that, difficulty for it. But once public opinion started to change, then that's when the slave trade changed. And that's what we put in our training, really, is that we need to educate. We need to educate the public, because unfortunately, and we see this every time we go out and speak to people, they have no idea of what's the recent bill that's gone through, but also about abortion. And so not only are we trying to educate the adults on the street, but ideally we'd like to do that earlier before they get to that stage. So I think it is, it's to be wise, it's to be compassionate, all those things that as Christians we know we need to be, but we do also need to be bold, and we need to do the things that God has called us to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just encourage teachers that you don't know who's sitting in your classroom when you're bold enough to share this information. And all those years ago, it was me in that classroom, and I was a pro-abortion student who'd written essays about how it was a woman's right to choose and it was a good, healthy option, until a teacher allowed some external speakers to come in and share a pretty boring presentation, sadly, but we're at the end with the option to see a picture of an aborted baby, which I was glad to do as someone who supported abortion. And here I am all these years later behind Pro-Life Advocate, sharing the truth about abortion across the nation and encouraging others to do the same, because the teacher was bold enough to let someone in to share this information. If she had never done that, who knows? Who knows? But the Lord knew.
Yeah. Thank the Lord for that opportunity, and may your work be blessed amongst those young people that may be a future Catherine or a Carolyn. So where can we find more of your resources and find out more about CBR?
On our website, we do have all the links for the education material, so we're happy for you to use that in whatever way you want. We're happy for, if you want to contact us and you want our logo to come off it so that it's not on as our work.
Sure.
And we're happy to help in any way. If you feel you want to know more about abortion, about the pro-life movement, there's lots of information on our webpage that you can contact either myself or Catherine, and we're happy to help in any way. We're also happy, we have a team of speakers around the country that are happy to come into your church and to speak about the pro-life movement and to offer more education in that, because we know that churches are not educating Christians enough about this, which is why Christians are fearful of discussing it, because they don't know it enough. So we're more than happy to have that opportunity as well. And we're also, we do have an organisation as well where we help women who have had abortions as well. So there is that side as well. We do try and cater for all those needs. And so it's not just looking at the lessons in the classroom, it's remembering the staff as well that you're working with, isn't it?
Sure, really holistic approach. Okay, thank you so much. And yeah, bless you in your work. And have you got the website?
Yeah, it's cbruk.org/schools. We'll take you to the schools resources. Yeah, we hope you do get in touch. Just contact info@cbruk.org if you want to ask us any questions or have a call with us. We're happy to chat with you and encourage you along.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. Great to hear
Thank
from
you for having us.
And thank you for the opportunity.